Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. We begin tonight in British Columbia, where the Tseshaht First Nation is releasing Phase 1 of their findings on suspected unmarked graves at a former residential school near Port Alberni. APTN's Tina House joins us from Vancouver Island.
We're here at the former Alberni Indian Residential School, and as you can see, one of the buildings is still remaining here today. In fact, we're standing on some of the ground that they searched. Joining me today is the president of the Tseshaht Tribal Council, Dr. Judith Sayers. Dr. Sayers, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for asking.
How are you feeling today?
A little bit shaky, very emotional, and been dreading this day for a long time. Yeah.
Tell us about the history of this Indian Residential School and what it meant for the Tseshaht people here.
Well, you know, of course it was established many years ago, and so many of our people came to this residential school, as well as people from, I believe, almost 100 other First Nations. So it was, you know, a really big deal in residential schools. So many people came here. You know, my mother came here, my family came here, and so we're all impacted by this announcement today.
I mean, this goes back for generations upon generations. I mean, you're a residential school survivor, generational survivor yourself. You know, what has it been like here in this community for leading up to this day and this big announcement that we're about to hear?
Well, I think we have all wanted justice for what happened here. You know, the truth has always been known. We know that, you know, our children were murdered, killed, and buried around. We just didn't know the numbers. We know there have been other horrific incidences that happened within the school. Our survivors have talked about them. And so documenting those stories and trying to do something about it has been something that we've been trying for a long time. And getting recognition of it, you know, getting recognition by the Pope that this really was genocide, you know, and other leaders, you know, that's really important, that, you know, what the attempt was to try and kill off the Indian. And so, you know, today that truth is known, and we'll know the extent of that truth a little later. But, you know, for us, it's making sure those children make it home that didn't make it home, that those families who don't know what happened to their children will now know, and that, you know, we can pursue as much as we can a form of reconciliation, that the rights will be wronged on our terms. It can't be anybody else's terms. We have to say what we need for all of the horrible things that happened to our people.
Indeed. Dr. Sayers, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. Back to you in studio.
Thanks, Tina. The National Indian Residential School Crisis Line is available for survivors and others who might need support. That number is 1-866-925-4419. Meanwhile, the chief of a Saskatchewan First Nation has been appointed to oversee a new residential school documents advisory committee. In a press release Tuesday morning, Crown Indigenous Relations announced Tseshaht First Nation Chief Cadmus Delorme will be the chairperson of the new committee. The government says the committee will be made up of survivors, Indigenous community members, and federal and expert representatives. Crown Indigenous Relations is currently identifying residential school documents it has not shared previously, and has provided an additional $1.5 million to the $1.5 million documents to the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. In other news, it was touted as the World Unity Convoy and set up over the long weekend just outside Winnipeg. The gathering, with roots in last year's Freedom Convoy, was expected to draw thousands from across the country. However, photos and videos appear to show a smaller gathering. Leading up to the event, some convoy supporters on social media displayed the Métis symbol, the horizontal infinity symbol, and some attendees like this flew the Métis flag. something that doesn't sit well with Manitoba Métis Federation President David Chartrand. In a telephone interview, Chartrand said Métis are not the convoy participants, don't have respect for governments.
So clearly from that perspective, they believe they can grab anything they want, claim anything they want, and then try to impress upon those that I have the great Métis Nation behind me. I'll make it very clear, whether they're Métis or non-Métis that flag, they do not have the Métis government behind them. We do not support what they're doing.
Trappers are bringing their knowledge of the land inside the walls of the Yellowknife jail. Our reporter Charlotte Jacobs checked out the program where inmates have the opportunity to connect with culture while learning practical skills. Here's that story.
It's a little smaller than the animals Roy and Iktalak normally harvests back home in Ulaqtuk, Northwest Territories. But nonetheless, he enjoys the change of pace, bringing the outdoors indoors to pass the time.
Yes, I started hunting when I was 5 years old, and I've been on it since. I've never stopped. Can't live without native foods. I love doing stuff like this because it helps try to keep the tradition alive and pass on knowledge from generation to generation upon generations.
See, look at that.
Iniktalak is one of half a dozen inmates attending today's drop-in land-based educational programming at the North Slade Correctional Complex in Yellowknife. The program has been in operation for over a year. It runs on a 5-week cycle with 2 in-class sessions on trip planning and survival and another on economics and regulations around trapping. But then there's the hands-on portion, learning tips and tricks on machine repair, shelter building, and skinning animals. It's also a chance to get some fresh air.
I help set up all events like this, and we do shoveling out in the front, getting the snow off the walkway there. We do fire.
Dean McNeely of Fort Good Hope NWT says the program feels like home.
Learning my culture and it's a really good experience and stuff, so I liked it. And I would.
If you want Everton,
well, I would still try it if I had time. So.
Squirrel's only worth $2. You're going to get an additional $5.
The program is also facilitated by Environment and Natural Resource Officers, who hope to provide inmates with an opportunity for income upon release.
With a lot of individuals, that sort of sharing becomes a big part of it. I am an expert at something. I can do this better than a lot of people. Not to do that, but I can share my knowledge with others, and I think that can feel very empowering for individuals.
Times when you're doing that to it compared.
For Iniktalak, he'll continue harvesting when he gets out later this year for some extra cash. But more importantly, he'll have sharpened his skills and will be ready to bring his 3 daughters out on the land.
It keeps me calm, like I actually makes me feel like I'm worthy again. Polar bear, wolves, foxes, rabbits, muskox, caribou, yeah, anything with 4 legs and a heartbeat, basically, yeah.
Charlotte Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Thanks, Charlotte. Lawyers involved in a proposed class action lawsuit over forced sterilization are now suing each other. Details on that and more coming up after the break. Welcome back. Jamaican-Canadian Juno Award winner Julie Black gave a voice to Indigenous history on Sunday evening when she sang the Canadian National Anthem at the NBA All-Star Game in Salt Lake City, Utah. Here's APTN's Chris Stewart now with some reaction.
Tens of thousands of basketball fans and millions around the world heard what one word can do to change a song. Award-winning singer-songwriter Julie Black changed one word at the beginning of O Canada.
Oh, Canada, our home on
land.
Her social media had mostly positive comments on her take on the national anthem. APTN viewer Josh Littlechild told APTN that her one-word change had a big impact for him.
I felt really good hearing it. The visceral reaction that she was able to get out of changing one word that really spoke the truth about the history of Canada was brilliant, because it just brought out a lot of emotions from everyone. I really loved it.
And Littlechild says that the worldwide audience might help showcase the history and social issues faced by Indigenous peoples.
What an opportunity, like a great opportunity to take that issue and bring it to the world stage. I hope more artists follow, and I hope that could create awareness towards, I guess, our cause, but also hopefully it could change some attitudes towards some people, perception of Indigenous people in Canada.
Oh, Canada, our home on a native land.
One word can have plenty of power. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
APTN has been following the stories of forced or coerced sterilization closely. In 2020, we interviewed lawyer Elisa Lombard about a proposed class action lawsuit for women who were coercively sterilized. Online reporter Danielle Parody just reported a story about Luana Robertson. She's one of the plaintiffs who spoke to APTN about her frustrations with the class action process. And Danielle joins me now. Hey Danielle, thanks for being with us. Can you tell us about Luana and why she wanted to get her story out?
So Luana reached out. She felt really abandoned by this process. She was sterilized in 1997. At that time, she said that she'd reached out to other people, or reached out to lawyers at that time, once she discovered that the tubal ligation that she had was permanent. When she was in the, like so many stories that we've heard, she was informed that it was reversible if she wished, and that she'd be able to have more children, and she signed on in the middle of a delivery. So after sharing this story, after signing up for the lawsuit in 2020, she's really been looking for answers, and she was having trouble getting responses. She'd reached out to law firms, she reached out to Elisa Lombard, and she'd reached out to the Law Society of Alberta. So that's what brought her to touch base with APTN. And she's a very tenacious person in trying to get answers for herself.
Well, and so you mentioned the lawyers there, and it sounds like they're fighting amongst themselves now. How's this affecting the other women?
We don't yet know. When she signed on, she was told that there were 50 other women. When we spoke to the lawyer, she said that the class action was such in Saskatchewan that you didn't need to sign on, that it was more of an opt-out basis. But we do know that at least 50 women at the time that Luana had signed on had expressed some sort of interest, and we're not sure where they're at or if they're looking for the same answers. And that was also something that Luana brought up a lot during our conversations, is that she's thinking if she's feeling alone, other people may also be feeling alone in this.
So you spoke with lawyer Elisa Lombard, who's kind of been the face of this class action suit. What did she have to say?
Yeah, Elisa Lombard, like I mentioned, talked about the how you don't necessarily need to communicate with her, that she's working on a website for women who are wondering what's going on, who may have signed on in 2020 or later. And she said she's been working away on it, and that they've just done a case management conference, which is a very early stage in a class action, at the very beginning, to decide what the case management is, as the name suggests. And she is hoping to have the certification in place by this summer. But that's not strictly up to her; it's also up to the court. So
Danielle, what happens next here?
Next, we wait and see, will the class action be certified, if other women are curious about what's going on, or have other stories to tell, then of course APTN would be glad to hear from them. But we're in a bit of a waiting game right now, Dennis. There's not. That's what we're sort of waiting to see what the next steps of this class action or multiple class actions finally are.
Well, important work there on, like you say, a class action that we haven't heard about in a while, Danielle. Thanks for your reporting on this and for joining us.
Thank you, Dennis.
Still to come, a new series of books that are tailor-made for young Indigenous boys. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now to take a look at our photo of the day. Nadia Marion sent in this great photo. She was on her way to work in Fredericton, New Brunswick when she happened upon this most beautiful winter wonderland moment. Thanks, Nadia. You can send us your great photos to share at aptn.ca for the chance to have your photo shared across the country. Now let's see how much more winter wonderland we have in the forecast for tomorrow. Spoiler alert, it's a lot. Here's a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, +5 for Halifax, 3 below in Charlottetown, -28 in Kuujjuaq, snow and 20 below in Nain, -2 with snow in Montreal, 20 below for Chibougamau, -7 in Sault Ste. Marie, sunny and 10 below in North Bay. Sunny and 13 below in Thunder Bay, -20 under the sun in Sioux Lookout, -24 in God's Lake and the Paw, 23 below in Norway House, -23 for Winnipeg and Dauphin, -23 in Regina, 26 below for Saskatoon, -24 and sunny in Meadow Lake, 25 below in La Ronge. Over to northern Alberta, sunny and 23 below for Fort McMurray. -24 in Edmonton, snow and 22 below in Lethbridge. +8 with a chance of snow in Vancouver, +1 in Victoria. -16 in Prince George, sunny and 10 below for Smithers. -27 in Old Crow, 14 below in Whitehorse. -24 for Yellowknife, 27 below in Norman Wells. -29 in Sax Harbor and Colville Lake. -38 for Chesterfield, 34 below in Whale Cove, -29 in Resolute, -32 in Igloolik. Author Christy White noticed there was a lack of culturally relevant material for Indigenous children to relate to. So she took matters into her own hands and created a series of educational books with characters targeting young Indigenous boys. Steve Monjo brings you the adventures of Jay and Gizmo.
These grade 3 and 4 kids are heading into the Chippewa School Library in London, Ontario. They're in store for a surprise book reading like no other.
The first book we're going to start with is The Adventures of Jay and Gizmo. Jay and Gizmo learn about hoop dancing.
Jay and Gizmo is a new children's book series featuring the adventures of a young Indigenous boy and his friend Gizmo the cat.
They go and travel all over the place and learn about all different Indigenous culture, such as hoop dancing and powwow, boys with braids. So we talk about inclusion and just really giving all children a little bit of insight to Indigenous culture.
One character Jay and Gizmo meet is River. He's a hoop dancer with autism who likes to perform at powwows. Christy based River on her son, who's also named River. He came out today to perform and says the books are a great idea for kids to learn about inclusion and differences.
One of the things I'm hoping, especially out of book 2, which is the book I'm featured in, I'm hoping that we can get a better understanding of how differences don't make people innately worse than one another. I think that's something that needs to be talked about, not only in our communities but globally, is bettering the lives of those who have disabilities, as well as being more inclusive to everyone.
The kids enjoyed hearing and seeing about Jay and Gizmo in their fun adventures together today, says Chippewa librarian Christine Hardy, who thinks they are great learning books.
The students really love the books. They're really engaged with the characters. They love Jay, they love Gizmo, and they love all of the adventures. And seeing them in real life come to life was excellent for them.
Christy works from her kitchen table, preparing to send out all the book orders. She is very excited by the response. Over 7,000 sets have been sent out so far. Residential school survivors wanting to share the stories with their grandchildren are a big part of sales. White hopes to have them translated into other Indigenous languages soon.
The books are used around the world because brown boys will identify with brown boys, and that's something they have a really hard time doing. So a lot of the boys in Guatemala, Philippines, places like that, right, they're so eager to see a boy who looks similar to them, if not the same. It's still representation of them, right? And it's giving them that little piece of Indigenous culture. Dancer G.J. White is another real person White fictionalizes. The duo meet him during their adventure in Jay and Gizmo Learn About Powwows. And DJ White brought his dance shown in the book for the kids to experience. DJ hopes children everywhere can learn and respect different ways of life in a positive way.
Having literacy for our youth and children really helps them advance in their educational and their own knowledge, and also gets that awareness out for Indigenous cultural and beliefs. And so where we have our long hair, how we are in our regalia.
Jay and Gizmo can be found online. Christy says they will be going on new adventures soon as she continues to explore Jay's Indigenous culture. Steve Monjo, APTN National News, London, Ontario.
That's one unique book reading. Looks like some super great books, too. Well, a new episode of Face to Face airs tonight, right after the news. Our guest this week grew up in a life of gangs, addiction, and prison. But Vinnie Lilly has since turned his life around and now helps some of Winnipeg's most vulnerable.
I know that there's a lot of judgment coming from people about the homeless people and, and how they're addicted to drugs and they're addicted to drinking and, all that kind of stuff. But the truth of the matter is while you're pointing your finger at these people who are addicted to something and saying why the addiction, that's not the question. The question is why the pain. The individuals who are addicted and who are homeless and stuff, all of them are suffering from severe trauma. And this is the root cause of the addiction, and this is the root cause of all the problems that are going on in the city, is the trauma.
And you can catch our entire interview with Vinnie Lilly right here in less than 2 minutes' time. Be sure to join us tomorrow live at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for In Focus. Daryl will be looking back on this year's Sisters in Spirit marches and the broader issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For much more on anything you've seen here, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Have a great day.